to be fair.
Yes, that is the storm.
I don't like that at all. And we are live. And if you hear things in the background, it's because even though I asked politely, Sean refuses to turn off the storm behind him. And it's really upsetting me. And I wish that Sean, Dice with Rice, would acquiesce to my demands.
Yeah, I'll get talking to Mother Nature about that.
And it's bothersome. If you could just make that happen, that would be awesome. So, you know what we're going to talk about today? Of course you do, because you made the slideshow. But we're going to talk about deal with the meta, how to pick your faction. And this is near and dear to my heart because I think that a lot of people are unhappy with what they're playing, and they have to focus more on how to make what they're playing the best thing for them than to completely chase things all the time. So
this is something also that's important to me. I have steered people to the correct faction way more times than I have helped someone just, make their absolute perfect list and where they're, the faction they're currently trying to work with.
Ooh, I do want to tell you that I have audio for you and I today, so it's a big thing. I decided to start without that yesterday.
So, oh, really? Ah, nice. Good. We're one leg up on the Monday show.
Loving it. So, one of my favorite things we have to talk about today is rules are for the moment, cool models are forever. I can't be more behind that as a person that can barely see colors, but I love conversions. Cool models are what you want. And the thing is that some of us, cough, cough, Sean, sell things away. Brad hoards them forever. Because cool models are forever. Rules, literally, you're going to ride the roller coaster if you're playing a GW product. Okay, here, your stuff's going to be good, and then it's not going to be good. You just accept that, move on with your life. It is. You're going to have models that are awesome. They're going to have great rules. And then you're going to have models that are really awesome and then not really awesome. And then not really awesome. And then not really awesome again because they were so good in one of the editions that they've been punished for so long.
Yep, you get put in the cycle, the vicious cycle of being happy with your rules and then simultaneously, 11 months go by and suddenly you don't even want to play your faction anymore.
So let's talk about how to pick your faction. First off, Sean's wrong because you pick your faction, number one, based on the lore, how cool your faction is. Did Azrael Vec take over the entirety of the Dark City after being a slave? Yes, that is awesome. Do orcs literally take over the galaxy if they could get their shit together for 2 seconds because they're the best psychers in the galaxy? Yes, and they're awesome. I'm just saying, there's cool stuff out there, and you should be.
Lore nerd doing lore nerd things. I'm shocked.
This guy. So, but let's talk about the models, because I do want to talk about the models and the lore before we talk about how the army plays over time. And by the way, I love the fact that you put then and only then the army's current rules. And I know I'm bouncing around just a bit here, but the three first points are going to be so much more important to you than your current rules, because the current rules change. We're getting a data slate in December, in January, whenever. It's in winter. You're getting that they said every 3 months, every 6 months. The rules are going to wildly change. Your rules might change. You know what I mean? You have to be happy with the models, the lore, and how your army generally plays to be happy with your faction. If you're not happy with those things, momentary spots of they're the best thing in the meta aren't going to make you happy with that army over time.
This is a trial and error that I went through personally, is It's well known that I have several armies, and as Brad has mentioned, I have sold several armies.
Boo.
If I had taken the time to, really learn what was important to me about this game, I would have more armies than I do now, and I would have stressed a lot less about collecting models.
Or you could do exactly what Danny says. Just get faction ADD and collect every faction. Nothing wrong with that. That is true.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Tyler does point out 100% for me. Any army with units more than 100 points are collecting dust on Snake's shelf, so Brad has to play trashiest armies with all the jank. You're not wrong. Also, speaking of people that have all the armies in the universe, Tyler, I think, has, I don't know, 50,000 points of every faction in the universe. So he has several of the things. So let's talk about what is important. We already talked about the biggest things in your faction. I do want to revisit those before we continue on. Because, again, current rules, if you're looking to army hop, that's fine. Current rules, you're trying to play the best. And one of the things that we'll talk about is just picking the best thing and playing that every single time. And that's an option. But if you're looking to be happy with your collection, you're going to want cool models, cool lore, and a cool... What is basically the identity of the army? Is it an aggressive army? Is it a poor control army? Is it an army that's super tricksy? What do you like playing? It's a big, big thing on that. So he is happy to hear me. What is the coolest model on the screen, by the way, Sean, for you?
Oh, well, given that I made the PowerPoint, I got to pick all of the awesome looking models.
I know. What's the best model here? Yeah, that's the thing is that you should always be looking at that kind of stuff when you're looking to choose your faction.
Okay, so it has to be the Silent King for me. If you've watched War Games Live before, I have some, as Joe calls them, some golf course Necrons, and I have the Silent King towering over the golf course on his giant rock. Instead of a throne, he's just on a giant rock with his dude spread out around it. And then every other Necron is just on like the most basic green grass base you can possibly see. And that is my favorite model because you can do cool stuff like that with them.
I mean, really, exactly. Where are the Primarchs? And it's also Helbrecht, because sometimes you just have to have a guy polishing your sword as part of your model.
Yeah. I love all these.
And my wife is literally in the bathroom yelling, going, yeah, you got to polish that sword. So, but I love it. I notice a distinct lack of good models. Now,
challenge. I'm getting shots fired.
Now, here's the big thing.
Awesome.
You're talking about customizing models, and I'm a huge fan of conversions. That's my thing. Painting, that's overrated. You see my sick painting skills. But every faction is going to be cool at some point in time. So being a faction specialist is legit, and it lets you focus more on your hobby. It makes you focus more on individual models. And when I say individual models, you get those chapter masters, those Primarchs out there. You can do large, time-consuming projects because that is the faction that you play. So you can spend more time. There's nothing wrong with being a faction specialist. And it also does give you a little bit of pride when your faction is in the shitter, making it work. You know what I mean? I do like solving that problem sometimes. I don't have the attention span to play just one thing because I'm a child and I need to go all over the place. But I do like playing things that you need to solve the meta with. Maybe you want to watch and like and subscribe to Dice with Rice and the Death or Glory Wargaming, because it makes a big difference to us. It is amazing if you would help. Huh? Shameless self-promotion.
We're getting better at it.
See how I literally segued right into that?
Yeah, that was good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it does give me heart palpitations. He should be cheaper. And he also shouldn't take up 18 spots in a freaking battle wagon. Also, I want everybody to know, if you've got a battle wagon and you're putting Gaz in it and you haven't modeled it as Gaz in a hot tub, you're doing it wrong, because that's the only way that he takes up 18 spots. So,
True.
let's talk about 40k modern archetypes. And you have to do this when we're making a list. It doesn't have to be just your faction, but every faction has to look at what they have to face against. So like these archetypes are out there and these faction archetypes are out there. So you're going to have to contend with these. These just exist. The stat check army. Your weapons aren't effective into what I brought. So sadness. You always have to make sure that you have the ability to take care of an army in case if it just shows up in front of you. I do like the aggro. Deal with my models instead of scoring, please. Board control. Basically every army I've ever played. Attrition. Like I actually think I might play board control and attrition because I do like nickel and diming people into submission. You're like, I don't know what happened. Brad felt like he was losing the whole time, but then he didn't. And then of course you've got GW's Golden Children. There's always going to be one army that is stat checked better than everybody else. I'm sorry, it just is. GW is a company that tries to sell. They do sell models.
They do sell. Yeah.
But they're going to, there's going to be some codex creep. There's going to be some rules that come out almost always, weirdly enough, hand in hand with a new model. So if there's
It's
a new...
weird how that always works out that way, huh?
It's crazy. It's like if I see a new sculpt, it's also going to have bonkers rules.
Bonkers rules every time.
GW Golden Shiny Galar. You're not wrong. There's been a couple times when it wasn't right, but most of the time,
it's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Gaz isn't taking up the 18 slots. He's just making room for Makari. Makari's like a grot. He's so small. I mean, he's got a big banner. But some factions can play a lot of different things, and to be perfectly honest, I play a lot of factions that can do multiple things, but those multiple things are very similar. I think I can also make most factions into a Brad faction, which is bring more trash, make it happen, be attrition and board control. But you have to, and the thing is that I think that it's very important. I make it as a joke, but it's very important to figure out what type of player you are. Yep. Don't play things that are not your style. You're not going to be happy with them. And you're not going to be happy with them even if they are the best thing. You're just not going to like playing them. We're again playing with toys. You got to be happy playing with toys. You're unhappy playing with your toys. Play with different toys.
Yeah, and obviously one good example is on the screen there. Brad's not touching Imperial Knights with a 10-foot pole.
Absolutely not.
That is not Brad's jam. That makes Brad sad, and it also can't play the way that Brad plays. So instead of just saying, oh, Imperial Knights are the best army right now, Brad just doesn't do that. He just doesn't play that army. And that is very, very smart to do, because Brad is never going to get hung up if Imperial Knights have good rules or bad rules.
Okay.
And he just doesn't ever have to worry about it.
Yep. When they had the Lance formation, that was pretty busted, and I went, yeah, I'm still not playing. It's not my jam. I know the things that may give me joy. And the thing is that you should be having fun when you're playing 40K. I want to win my games. I'm not trying to lose my games. But I'm also trying to have fun with the things that are on the table right now. All right. My favorite faction's Eldar. You know what I haven't played in 10th edition? Eldar. Because it doesn't bring joy to my heart. Oh. Let's talk about stat check. You know what? I'm gonna let you talk for a change.
Cool. All right. Let's go over. This is one of the first categories of armies you play. You can play in this game. What is the overarching goal? If you are bringing a bunch of, I don't know, T12 Imperial Knights, and your opponent does not have Strength 12 weapons, that is the definition of a stat check. You are bringing a stat line mismatch into the game, where their weapons are not good into you. Now, the other option for a stat check army is Brad's other nemesis, which is 10,000 models on the table. Because, as you can see...
I played those armies.
Yeah, and he hated it every second, and it definitely was a negative contributor to his health.
It has now shortened my lifespan.
Yeah. So if you do not like those things, that's okay. That is just what stat check brings to the table. Now, of course, you can play 30 pink horrors in your demons list and some greater demons. That does not mean you're a stat check army, because your goal is not to dominate the primary through this mismatch of weapons to units you brought. A lot of times what it requires to deal with stat check army is volume. And I don't mean just volume of shots. Obviously, you need that if your opponent brings a bunch of models. You need a volume of shots. But if you bring all giant T12 bodies, or in Chaos Knight's case, a bunch of T10 bodies, you're going to need a volume of strength 10 or better weapons to effectively deal with it. Finally, when you're playing a stat check army, you are focusing on the primary. So if you've ever found yourself in a spot where you just don't really get, secondary scoring or what have you, if you just play a bunch of giant robots or a horde of bodies, you're going to dominate the primary enough a good portion of the time that having a lower secondary score isn't going to matter as much when your opponent just doesn't have any primary points. So if you love playing that style of game, you love having a ton of models and being everywhere and overwhelming your opponent, or you like playing a few massive models that are very tough and hard to get rid of, then this is the kind of army for you. Now, if you don't like the idea of being this immovable wall or innumerable swarms of bodies, that's fine, but this thing isn't for you. So don't panic when we go to the faction section and you see your faction on here and you're like, wait, but I don't like doing those things. That's okay. Some factions can do multiple roles. It's just this is the main one for them across time.
Time innumerable. So we've got Dark Angels Unforgiven, basically Terminators, man. Terminators in the Swarm, Big Thing Knights, Necrons with just Necron-y stuff, doing Necron things. Oh, that actually would make me happy. Sorry, I got a little bit segued into...
Squirrel!
I did.
All right, hit us.
When I saw that a knight that has a secret wine compartment, now that might be a knight that I could get behind. Back into the view. Black Templar Ironstorm, just basically a ton of gladiators, just big boy tanks, using all that stuff. Those are just stat check armies. They're like, oh, hey, do you have enough hard removal to take care of this? Do you have enough volume to take care of this? And that's a real deal. Now, the next type we're going to go into is aggro, which actually a lot of these play very different. Even though you think they'll be similar with stat check, but aggro armies can also become board control armies depending on your playstyle. But continue, and then I'm going to disagree.
So the point of aggro, if a lot of times we compare one competitive game to another. Aggro in 40K does similar things. Yes, you're trying to get aggressive, duh. But it's asking different questions than, say, just, like in Magic. Reduce your opponent's life points to 0 as fast as possible. In 40K, you're not necessarily trying to remove all your opponent's models. But again, there's part of the aggro archetype that does that. Cough, cough, Tau. Across time, you're going to come into two types of aggro armies. The first is a pressure style aggro. This is more of your orcs, your world eaters, where they aren't so much concerned with removing all your models. They're more concerned with you physically cannot go anywhere because you have to deal with all this stuff that's in your face. And then by the time that you've dealt with all of it, I have such a high score that you can't win anymore. The second type is obviously that Tau type, where this is all of us playing Tau at last LVO, where sometimes you're done in 45 minutes or your opponent gives up on turn 1 because all your Tau planes blew everything up. That is definitely aggro. It's just a different kind of aggro. So as you'd expect, you're taking the initiative. If you love being the one that says, hey, deal with this. I am right here. I'm in your face. That's my jam. This is, of course, a good fit for you. If you don't care about your little orcs that are being blown off the table left and right, those Gretchen were meaningless to you.
I care about all of my orcs.
No, yeah, so much so that sometimes they don't even make it on the table. Sometimes they're hiding. Yeah, that's right. I went there. You're getting it from the Monday show and right here. So you got to be comfortable losing the units. Like, they're going to accomplish something, but, if they're not on the table at the end of the game, that is fine with you because you sent them to your opponent and made it a big problem. And finally, this is what Brad was talking about at the beginning, which is where an aggro army can kind of switch roles. When this is really a thing for a lot of pressure lists, like orcs or world eaters. You can take advantage of how much damage you can do and how in your face you can be, that suddenly you're playing more of a long, drawn out, complex game with your opponent. If that also speaks to you, to where we called this in our World Eaters video tactical violence. You can threaten to deal a whole bunch of damage and then just not.
Passive aggressive.
Passive aggressiveness at its finest. So if any of those sounded appealing to you, that's probably where you want to end up. And if you are very uncomfortable getting up close and personal with your opponent, or you are maybe a little bit uncomfortable if you, when I said that Tau thing where, all of us at LVO last year basically just tried to remove all of our opponent's models as fast as possible. If that strikes you as something that, isn't really appealing because you want to play more of a game with your opponent rather than just roll dice at them until they don't exist anymore, then this probably isn't the archetype for you.
And I do want to give some examples on this because we're going to go to the examples of the factions, but I want to give a couple stories on this. One, all of my orc play is literally a lot of times moving to those middle objectives and sitting on them and going, I can go this far. And then also sometimes just pushing baby in the corner and running up points and then going, it doesn't matter. One of my favorite armies, and Tyler's in it made me think of it, is when we had the Deathcore Krieg Riders and with Admech and the Sulphur Hounds and the whatever else their other riders were. And this, I think it was an 8th edition. And Tyler came up with a list and he's running it by me and we're back and forth. And it was literally an aggro army that was so fast with scout moves and had so many wounds that he could just stick people in the corner, and he literally brought it to the Glass City. And he killed some stuff, but I don't think it mattered because he had so many bodies and so many wounds that people didn't get to leave their deployment zone. I think in 4 or 5 of his games out of his 6, no one got out of the deployment zone. They were just putting his guys in a wood chipper, but they never got to score any points. So it didn't matter at all. He just got an auto win of, all right, it's turn 4 and you're about to walk outside of your deployment zone and I'm up, 93-5. I think I've got this one.
Oh yeah. That sounds amazing. That reminds me of the other thing that Guard you could do where you just took a swarm of bodies and so many you couldn't even fit them in your deployment zone most of the time. And just kept putting them on the board over and over again.
But it's a big thing on this because you can... everybody thinks of aggro as just this army that has to go punch. Sometimes aggro is the threat of the aggro, and sometimes it's I pushed you with my speed, my aggressive speed. I pushed you into the corner. So, and that leads us to what you should love and be playing, board control, because that's what old men play.
All right, so board control. This is very. I think we did a good job explaining it in the Tampa recap that we did as well, where I took a board control army, and Brad always plays board control. I jump around, but basically the goal here is you're going to limit what your opponent can do. Now this. Before we jump right into it, this does not mean you tell your opponent they can't move or something like that. It's the threat of what you can do stops your opponent from making decisions you don't want them to do. Brad's worst nightmare is his opponent ignores the game and runs straight at him. There's nothing to control if your opponent just says, I'm going to make 10-inch charges, and then they do.
Stop making bad decisions and having them work out for you.
That's exactly Brad's worst nightmare. And that is what this army is looking to control. If your opponent has to trudge across a bunch of open space and you've got a lot of guns, they're not going to just run into that open space and say, bring it. And that's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to use your medium amount of damage, enough to be respectable, but not enough where you're going to table every opponent. And you're trying to look for maximum play potential out of all your units. What does that mean? It means sometimes you take screening units. Now, screening units are best explained as usually little cheap units that can either go do a secondary, block where your opponent can move, or can stand in the way of your important units to stop your opponent from charging into those important units. Now, this could be anything. The funniest screen in modern Warhammer, I think, is basic cultists and nurglings against world eaters, because they have absolutely no way to deal with them, and they just have to send Angron into cultists, and that is hilarious to me. But that's the thing you're looking for when you're playing board control. You're looking for an all-comers list. You know, you've got enough volume of different kinds of weaponry to deal with the stat check. You've got enough little screening pieces like nurglings and cultists, or, you know, Space Marine infiltrators or scouts, that you can not be hit in the face as hard by orcs or world eaters. And really, you can just play a more balanced game.
Let me give you a little bit of this, because I love you put it. There's benefits to it because you can take on anything. It rewards highly skilled plays, but, and I want to give the buts on this, it does punish you for bad plays, and also you get into longer games because you typically, you have all the answers, you have to use those answers correctly, but also a lot of times, because you're not just max of damage and stuff, what happens is you end up grinding games out. Games go the distance quite a bit on that. So you have to be willing to want to play longer games a lot of times.
That's very true. And that's where we get to kind of, I'll jump to the bottom for a second. If your head starts to hurt when you have to plan out your entire turn in your command phase, that's probably not an army for you, because a lot of times you do have to do that. Personal, because Brad and I are all about stories for this one. When I was playing in Tampa and I was playing my board control Ultramarine list, I had several opponents that are like, you haven't done anything. And I'm like, yeah, because I need to measure your movement. I need to plan my oath. I need to decide if I'm going to use my Gladius army-wide ability. And I have to do all of this in the command phase before I even see my cards. And then I finally draw my cards, and then the plan changes a little bit. So if that is not appealing to you, if you do not like going through the rigmarole of figuring it all out each turn, then that's okay. But this army really needs to do that to kind of maximize what it can do in a game.
And it's a big deal in this when you look at the factions that do that. Generic Marines, especially Vanguard, Gladius, Tyranids, Synaptic Invasion, a little bit of Vanguard. It depends. You can just aggro Vanguard also.
That's right.
Chaos Demons for sure, if you're not just playing big boy spam. Deathwatch, Grey Knights, and Sisters are all wildly good examples of board control. They're not armies that are going to roll over you, but they have something that can handle almost anything, and they're always going to be putting up points. And it seems that you watch a lot of these armies, they're always putting up, even in their losses, they're putting up big points, even in their losses.
Good example. There is a Chaos Demons list that Cal Trey and I worked on at the height of Eldar's power this edition, that all it does is get 92 points. And there's nothing your opponent can do about it. What a good opponent realizes is, okay, well, I'm just going to make it so I can 100. And you're right, that's how you beat it. But most people don't see it until it's too late. And we got lots of free wins with our list against Eldar players who didn't realize what was going on. The goal was not to kill your Wraith Knight. It wasn't to attack your Fire Prisms or whatever. It was just to get 92 points. And it did that very, very well.
I play my orcs as support control. I play everything as support control, let's be honest. But the thing is that you can make those opportunities. Same thing in my run with the orcs. When I was still playing the OP version of Eldar, I knew I was going to kill certain things. I don't care. Score points, win the game. Board control, for me, I found this fairly early, to be honest with you. I found that this is what gives me joy. I enjoy solving the problem of lists, in-game things, and stuff like that. This makes me happy. This is what I play. And this is why I play these kind of armies, because I get the most fun out of this army. Yes, I like playing the newest, flashiest thing, but I go back to making most of my armies into board control armies because this is this type of style of play that I enjoy no matter what faction. So I want joy in my heart.
Brad, you made a good point. That is something you should look to be doing. Is when you are, we're showing you kind of like the outline here. If you look at your army and you go, hey, I kind of play like that no matter what. That's probably a sign to be like, oh, hey, maybe I should try this army. This army does that naturally. Like, its units work towards that goal. If you've ever played with Grey Knights as edition, they basically, beat you over the head with, hey, you're supposed to control the pace of the game, not just run at them with your Strength 6 AP2 weapons. Because that's probably not going to get it done most of the time.
Poor Grey Knights of that.
Just saying. Same thing with Sisters of Battle. That's something that it takes a lot of moving pieces to make Sisters work, and you really have to get maximum use out of them and know what you want to be doing and plan out your turn. And if you just try to YOLO it with Sisters, you'll find out you don't do that much damage, and most of our units just die immediately. And that is not a good feeling if you really love the models. So maybe there's that one Sisters player out there that's like, oh, I get it now. I'm not just supposed to run 3 immolators straight at them. I'm supposed to, figure out, how am I scoring this turn? How can I prevent my opponent from moving here? Because I tell them, hey, I've got this Retributor sitting next to this Triumph that's just going to dump a whole bunch of multi-melta shots at you in Overwatch for free. Using those things to your advantage is something you got to get used to as board control, because often you're not going to be able to be like, hey, Imperial Knights player that brought 4 Imperial Knights and deployed them on the line and went first and ran at me, I can just kill those. That's not usually going to be the answer for you. So you're going to look for alternative ways to deal with armies and to score points.
Let's talk about the attrition, because attrition armies, the way we're saying it here isn't really nickel and diming them, because attrition can be considered board control in this. Attrition here, we're more thinking of armies that are looking for big swing turns. They're looking to their big setups. If you're a card player, this is the OTK decks.
The combos.
The combos.
That's right.
And it's a big thing. I do want to jump into a little bit on what these are. We'll talk about it. Like currently your Thousand Suns, your Votans, your GSCs, your certain AdMech Imperial Guard builds. Certain armies that are literally looking to score points, huge turn. We take away 30 to 50% of my opponent's army, because that's when I sprung everything on them, and all of a sudden my opponent's left with not enough assets to come back to me.
Yep, and this one is the hardest to name category, but it's also I want to jump to the bottom there for a second. It's the hardest to design, honestly. If you think about how to balance and fix these armies, they often have very unique rules. Thousand Suns with their Cabal is a good example, but also they have sometimes problematic mechanics. You'll notice, like with Guard, artillery is a thing I think Guard should have. That should definitely be core to their identity, but it is very hard to balance that in a way that doesn't make them automatically overpowered, as we saw briefly.
Unfun.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of where we're talking with this. You could consider this the combo armies, but they often play that attrition role where you're trying to get a little bit, and then all at once.
It's a big deal in that I like the example of Votan on this, because Votan has a limited data sheets, so they can hit really, really hard, but they don't want to do trades the entire game because they have less shit typically. A little bit more than they used to have. Thank you. Oh God, those initial points. But you're going to be looking at these, so they have a little bit. And this is a big thing. They do have to borrow elements from all the other archetypes. They're going to be doing a little bit of board control. They're going to be doing a little bit of aggressive, depending on what else they have. But what they're looking to do is put big damage on you. Double Doom Bolt, Magnus Bomb, with Warp Flamers everywhere. Votan hitting you with their double Hearth Guard, with all the bikes and things of that nature. GSC bombing you down when they drop everything and put all the rerolls and the +1s on you with Crossfire. So they're looking for big swing turns, using their synergies to maximum. These aren't trying to stat check you. They're trying to use their rules. I put everybody that has judgment tokens on them, and now we're going to hit everybody this turn.
Oh yeah, a good example that I did forget to put in, but I wanted to say now. If you're ever playing Votan and you look at your 2-up save unit with Armor of Content and then suddenly it just disappears and you go, I don't understand. I have the 2-up save, I'm in cover, I have the Armor of Contempt. Why am I not winning this game that way? This is why. You are not a stat check army. You are not a tabling army. You are an army that needs those small little advantages and then to hit with everything. If you are trying to just rely on one of those elements, say, Votan, I just have enough damage to get through this game, usually doesn't work out for you. Or you go, well, I've got 2-up saves and I've got void armor. I'll get through this game that way. And then it doesn't quite work out. That's why you're struggling. You need to see it as that attrition army. You are not trying to just say all at once from turn 1 while your opponent's full firepower is there, here's all my stuff. You're not trying to do that. You're trying to see where you can get that advantage. You're seeing where, hey, I'm going to move this one Sagittar out. I'm going to take out one thing with my high las beams, and the guys inside are going to stand on this objective. How are you going to deal with that opponent? What are you going to give me for it? The exchange, I guess. And that's just a really good example when we talk with Votan players of why the data slate changes were really big for them. Because you finally got a moment where you could just take out 3 units and then get a little CP on the side. And that was a really big deal because now when you push to go all in, you're getting +1 to hit and wound exactly where it matters.
And it's big on that. So, you know what? We're going to talk about my favorite people.
Oh, boy.
GW's Golden Children. Whatever the best thing is. I don't know. Maybe you played 10th edition and you said, maybe I should play elves. Woo! That was busted. CSM right now. You know what I mean? You're basically just looking, and this is are you willing to play a lot of Warhammer? Weirdly enough, I play Warhammer without playing the
without the
Golden
broker. Yeah. You do the exact opposite of what normal people would do when they're looking for this. And yeah, that's pretty amazing that Brad is like, I want to play on hard mode, I want to be a snowflake, and also I need your models to do it, please.
But it is expensive. If you want to make this all yours, you're constantly going to be every few months going to a new faction. Because as with all of GW's Golden Children, just like the British English, the British dad and the Emperor, they will ignore you and punish you harshly at some point in time for being too good. Were you too good for too long? Did you fly too close to the sun? Are your wax wings melting off? Because you're going to get the stick. And that happens quite a bit. Cough, cough, GSC going into 9th. Oh, you were number 1 and you got hit pretty hard. GW has been known to put the beats on their top things. So, and the thing is that good units will change every couple of months, like I was saying. So you're going to have to continually get new things if you're going to do that. If you're a hobby master, this is one of my favorites when I talk to Matt Aaron about stuff. He's like, look, I can't just have you telling me what the best things to play in my faction are, because it takes me months to get things ready. So I need to go with what's going to be good enough, what's going to be fun. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, this is I would say this is I saw Crawley in chat too. This is the Crawley and I special of, cool, the tournament's Friday. I'm going to paint my entire army on Wednesday, and it's good to go. And, you do that 6 or 7 times, and suddenly you don't really want to paint anymore, because that is not fun for you anymore.
You also have to not be in love with any of these things, because of the fact that you're going to have to be real mercurial with your love, because it's going to go away. So it's a big deal in this. And I do like one of the things where I'm going to go to the gold roll real quick. It's grown men playing with toys, and I say this all the time. Don't chase, don't stress. We always say be aware of the meta, don't chase the meta. Because if you're chasing the meta, what's going to happen is you're going to make incorrect choices. You're going to have to guess. You're going to be unhappy with what you're playing because it's not your favorite faction. You chose something that was trying to give you that mechanical advantage, but you didn't end up having a fun advantage. And I'm gonna go back, but I want to give my story about how I tell everybody, anytime you're mad about something at 40K, always think about how you telling the story to somebody that doesn't play 40K sounds. Because you have to start with, I was playing with my toys with another adult, and here's why I'm mad. That's literally what it is. So let it wash off you. Be like water. So always adapting, flowing. But it's a big thing on this. So it's the biggest thing on your faction is, I know we want to be competitive. We want to win, but you want to win, and you're going to actually win more playing things you enjoy and that they're your style. Because if you're playing the latest and greatest, you went, hey, who just won? And you play, let's just say you play one of Manny's lists, and you're not a big fan of playing spam lists of 3 of everything. Well, you're not going to do well with that. Or you're going to do okay, but you're not going to do as well as you could with something slightly different. And I, especially if you're trying to play the GW's Golden Children, play the best thing, but make it your thing. Adapt it to your playstyle. I grab a lot of top armies, but I make them all board control. You know what I mean? I don't care if I was supposed to bring a Wraith Knight and Wraith Guard are, I'm never going to do that because I already got nervous talking about putting that many points in units. So, like, you're going to make things play the way that you want them to play, even if you're playing different factions on that. Make those factions into what you want.
And you could totally still win. I think Brad and I are like 36 and like 5 or something together this edition on just big tournaments, and we did not touch the very best thing. So you could still win a ton of games just enjoying yourself, taking a look at, what kind of, Brad said he loves board control armies. He is not just jumping down here to this, very unique to Warhammer thing of there's an archetype that is just GW has said this is the best thing. We kind of need to sell some models. Here you go. And Brad and I are touching that. We're still winning games. So you don't have to do this. And if you do this, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no, don't do that. Just know that there is some real cost to it over time. And you might find yourself looking at your collection and going, these aren't really well painted. I'm not really enjoying playing them. And also, yeah, I can't even play my list anymore because it now costs too many points. And that's not a good feeling for some people. Now, obviously, if you love that and you love that aspect of the game, go do it. And especially if you're a faction specialist, this is the thing this really grinds my gears when I see people that poo on this, is if your army is the best right now and that is your faction, you need to ignore what everyone else is saying. That is your faction. This game is for you. Just because your faction got amazing randomly doesn't mean you shouldn't play them. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a good time during your game. It doesn't mean that people get to dig on you for playing your faction. It's your thing. If you're a faction specialist like Matt Aaron, if Death Guard becomes broken overnight, I would never be upset that he's playing Death Guard. That's silly. He puts months into those models. He takes advantage of his hobby time. He enjoys crafting these overwhelmingly beautiful display boards and armies. He gets to play that, and you don't get to tell someone else they can't play that.
And one of the biggest things is that you want to, again, be having fun. And the thing is that you have to be adapting. And that's why we do these deal with it, is because you can't just be, my old thing doesn't work. You have to be adapting. You do have to adapt to the new armies that come out. Even if you're a faction specialist, you have to be constantly, here is the core concept of my army, and constantly be adapting to what happens. Not chasing, adapting and being aware. And always scissors, paper, rock, throat punch. If somebody tells you can't do something, do it anyways. Don't let someone, anybody, myself, anybody, don't let somebody poo-poo on a unit and then just not put it in, even though you've got a great, well-painted whatever, and you want to use it. You love the lore of that. You like the way it plays. Put shit on the board. See how it works. Learn from your mistakes. Learn from everything. It's just such a big deal on that. To, one, always number one, have fun. Two, you got to be just learning all the time. It should be just, okay, this is awesome, but also the rule cool always applies. It does. You know, somebody's got something that they put 100 hours of painting into. Well, I don't really give a shit if that thing's not as good as this other thing. Display that awesome thing that you have. It's a real thing, man. It just is.
Oh, there's also the best example of it is people really being down on Sisters, and then Sisters wins a super major. And if you look at it, this is someone who really embodies what Brad and I are saying. They named all of their units.
That was awesome.
They only play Sisters. They enjoy playing Sisters, and they sat down and they figured out what they wanted each individual unit to do, and then just played the game. They didn't listen to people tell them that Sisters are terrible, so you shouldn't play them. They just played hard, fair games in the best way they knew how for 9 rounds and won a super major. So this is the other half of it. If your army is not the Golden Children, play it.
Playmaker going with, thanks to stop listening to those people only saying follow the rule of 3, infinite of 1 unit. I mean, you can if that makes you happy, but you're gonna have to only play at the house. Yes. You will be what people would technically be called a cheater. So
yeah, and we should clarify that you make a good point directly there. Is we're not saying, Stompas are the best, bring 3 Stompas to everything. I don't even know if you bring 3 Stompas. 2 Stompas. You can't bring 2 Stompas to everything and expect to win because you're not following what Brad and I are saying and deal with it. You're not making a plan. You're not sticking to, an archetype and really figuring out how you want to play the game. You're just playing your awesome, big, cool model. And there's definitely a place for that, but you will not have the best results when doing that most of the time.
You know what? What I want to end with today is, I'm not even going to do a poll. You know what? I'm going to make a poll, but there's not going to be any answers. The question is, what is the coolest model in 40K?
Ooh. Oh, man.
There it is. Obviously, you have to write it in chat because my poll says yes or no. I think that the yeses are going to win, but immediately. What's your go-to?
I have a cop-out. It is, as I said, it is the one you make. You literally just take awesome parts of different models, and you realize that, hey, if you don't like that chain or tube falling off your guy, you just snip it off, and then you make it into something else. That is the coolest model to me. I told you I did not like the Silent King's throne. I think it's dumb looking. I just put him on a rock, and I made a rocky outcropping for him to stand on. Let's see, my combi lieutenant in Space Marines, he's not bald with Tyranid stuff dripping on him. I gave him double Grey Knight falchions and a cape and a cloak hood. Like, build the thing you want. Make it awesome. And then if I have to go with one just model right off the bat, the Lion is amazing with his helmeted head.
Without the helmet, middle-aged Lion has seen some shit.
That's Brad in a nutshell.
Yes. Like I relate the middle-aged Lion literally showing up after 10,000 years and going, what the shit did you do to the Imperium? He just looks so 3 divorces later.
Crawley's calling me out here. He's every time I play my Silent King model, I have to go to Crawley and ask for more glue because he keeps falling off. His arm falls off. He falls off. His guys fall off. Yeah, it's fine. You make sacrifices to the glue gods sometimes.
I do have a unique model that's one of my favorites I still have. In 2000, Sniggs made me a Chaos Dreadnought, and he made it so out of the sarcophagus, green stuff, the guy crawling out of the chest of the Chaos Dreadnought, and it is still my favorite model 20-some years later.
All right, that's impressive.
It is. It's probably boss mode.
I thought you'd tell me some Exodite. He made you some Exodite, but no.
Because I still haven't got a goddamn Exodite army. Screw you, GW. I demand dinosaurs with bright lances on their heads. That's all I'm asking for.
Dinosaurs and dragons with elves riding them. That you heard it here first. That is Brad Chester's actual dream.
Hello, Playmaker. I wasn't even alive then. Yes, I went. at ATC, I wore a 2001 GT t-shirt. So I won that GT also.
Well, as we close out here, Brad, do you have anything you want to promote?
Yes, I do. 40K Lorecast. Bam. Check it out. It's all over. I got a Discord for it. It's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's on whatever. It's my Lorecast, and I'm super excited about it. We're just now pushing more and more stuff out. I'm about to record an episode on the War in Heaven, and then I'm going to start doing orcs after that.
Oh yeah, this is entirely unscripted, but Brad actually got me interested in a little bit of lore to listen to while I ride to tournaments and on planes and stuff. And
Yes.
He did that accidentally at one of the team tournaments by just going, no, that's not what happened. Here's what happened, and then dropping knowledge bombs on me about 40K lore. So go check that out for sure.
I'm a big fan of it. I'm excited. It's more of a conversation about the lore. We started out with the Horus Heresy. I basically set the stage, and we're going from there. And we're going over everything that happens, but it's in a conversational way with John Bersati and I.
Sweet. And also, it is Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Take care. Travel safe.
Travel safe. Have fun. Enjoy yourself, everyone. And always, stay milky.
Stay milky.